It's always surprising to me that people assume World War III hasn't already started. I would actually make the argument World War III has already started. We're in the middle of World War III right now. It's just that World War III looks nothing like World War II.
Right now, we have a hot war in Europe with Russia and Ukraine, and then we have another one in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas. What other parts of the world should we be paying attention to that have the most risk of becoming a hot war as well?
This is funny to me, Bryan, right? It's funny to me because what you're saying is what the average person understands. There are only two hot wars. Do you know how many armed conflicts there are right now in the world? There are 144 hot war zones in the world.
Wow.
Where is the next conflict? Where is the conflict going? I mean, right now, all roads clearly show that there is an increasing tension between the United States and China.
If China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
To become the next global leader, the next global superpower. If you look at what economists are estimating that the United States will no longer be the only superpower by 2032 and 2033.
Do you think the United States will ever have a draft again?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I've been hearing more and more people talk about. Unfortunately, I think...
Are there any big misconceptions about the CIA that you would like to address to the world?
Man, there are so many misconceptions about CIA. So, I don't even know how to take them all at once. The idea that CIA works against the American people is a massive misconception. The idea that CIA somehow employs children and sex slaves is a massive misconception. The fact that CIA runs without any kind of oversight is another misconception. And that's before we get to any of the really cool fun stuff like driving cars, shooting big fancy guns, and of course, only ever having beautiful people in their employment. All of those are misconceptions about CIA.
I've heard you once say that the CIA trains you to look and act like the most boring person, especially to your family. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, so there's a concept that we teach at CIA called being the gray man. And that idea of a gray man or a gray person really just means being forgettable, being someone that blends in the moment and who isn't worth remembering a few minutes later, right? That's what gray really is. It's that color that fades against all the bright colors out there, all the flashy colors out there. Everybody's trying to be somebody who gets attention. And what a spy wants is to just disappear. So that's what I mean by being gray. Boring people are gray. Ugly people are gray. Overweight people are gray, right? That's the benefit of really understanding the difference between real life espionage and what you see in the movies.
So speaking of the movies, this kind of reminds me, have you seen Oppenheimer? I'm assuming you've seen it.
I've heard of it. I haven't actually had a chance to watch it yet. I don't have 3 hours of life to commit to.
Yes. No, it's a long one. But what they do so perfectly is, I'm sure you know of the scientist that was at Los Alamos that ended up spying for the Soviets. What they do so perfectly is making him that almost gray, boring, just another scientist. And then you find out at the end that's the spy for the Soviets. Do you know anything about that story in particular, about how the Soviet spy for Los Alamos?
So what's interesting is that the case study in Oppenheimer and the case study that really happened throughout all of the development of nuclear weapons is still very much relevant today. People think that spy agencies are interested in senior politicians, right? Look at the Trump case right now, or all of the attention on Donald Trump. People think that the Russians are targeting Donald Trump, or that they've already recruited Donald Trump because he's the president of the United States. The way real espionage works, nobody goes after the top dog. Nobody goes after the president. They don't go after the senior ranking general. They don't go after the CEO of a company. You go after the people who are beneath that person 1 or 2 steps. Senior engineers, senior administrators, chiefs of staff. Right? Those are the individuals that you want to cultivate a relationship with, because those are the people that truly know what's going on. They truly know the secrets. Presidents don't know secrets. Presidents get briefed on secrets every day by 2 or 3 people who actually have access to secrets, right? In order for the president to know something secret, he has to ask somebody to ask somebody to ask somebody else. He can't just look it up on a computer like, say, a middle manager at CIA can. And that's exactly how it works in the corporate sector and in the national security sector. So you're seeing in Oppenheimer, you're seeing how vulnerable those engineers and those senior administrators and senior managers, you're seeing how vulnerable they really are to foreign intelligence collection.
How do you get people to open up to you in that way? So those middle people like you talked about, how do you get them to open up and be more vulnerable to you?
Well, there's a couple things that are interesting there, right? So first of all, getting people to open up to you isn't as hard as you might think, because it's human nature is the main lever that you want to pull on. People want to talk. All people want to talk. Even introverted people want to talk. The question is, what do they want to talk about? And oftentimes what happens is people end up in conversations talking to other people where the only thing anyone wants to talk about is themselves. So I'm talking to you, you talk about yourself, I talk about myself. Guess how we both feel about that conversation? It's pretty boring, right? I feel like you're not listening to me. I feel like all you want to do is talk about you, and we're not going to make any progress as far as a relationship goes. The primary thing that spies are taught is that when you have a conversation with somebody, you can basically assume that what they want to talk about is themselves. And you already know that the reason you're talking to that person is because they're a target of interest. You want to learn about them. So the main thing you have to do as a spy is just stop talking about yourself. You can still talk, but don't talk about yourself. Talk about the other person, ask questions, ask follow-up questions, ask open-ended questions, talk about things that the other person is interested in. I don't know anything about NASCAR. So if you're a big NASCAR fan, let's talk about NASCAR. Because as I learn from you about NASCAR, what I'm really learning is what you care about. And you're going to start talking about what you care about that's related to NASCAR, and you're going to talk about the things that you care about that have nothing to do with NASCAR. So the big thing that spies have to learn is just stop talking about yourself and let your target spill the beans.
Can you give some examples of how you would phrase the question? Because I feel like that's equally as important, right? Like asking, like you said, like asking open-ended questions, asking questions to get deeper about their personal life. Is there a certain way that you frame those questions to really get them to open up?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if you're game for an experiment, I'll do one with you right now.
Sure, let's do it.
All right, absolutely. So, hey, Bryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
What did you have for breakfast, man?
I had eggs and avocado toast.
So I try to have avocados every morning for breakfast because they're one of those fats that people don't realize are so important.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't know. So the body basically just needs 3 things to run, right? It needs carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Avocado is one of those fats. So is the yolk in an egg. So really the reason we like eating eggs with avocados is because you like the fat and the protein. And then guess what your toast is?
Carbs, right?
Carbs. Yep. Yeah. So then what did you have for lunch?
I had a protein bar. Nothing exciting.
Anything else?
That's it. I'll have something else after this, but just something to get me through, you know?
Is that a typical lunch for you?
No, it is not.
So what is typical?
Typical lunch is a protein shake.
So a protein lunch or a protein shake?
Yes.
Protein bar, protein shake.
I promise for dinner I have like a full meal, rice, chicken, yeah.
There we go. So are you just heavy in the gym, or what's that all about?
Yeah, I go to the gym 5 days a week.
Do you have a trainer, or are you your own trainer?
By myself, yep.
Oh, so I only really go to the gym when I have a set workout schedule. If I don't have a set workout routine, I do long distance running or something that is aerobic instead.
Yeah, I do some cardio. I do sauna, lift some weights.
And then is your gym close to home, or do you have a gym at home?
It's close to home, 5-minute walk.
Okay. So that was a very difficult conversation, Bryan, in many ways. What we saw there was I tried to use a technique on you called 2 questions and a follow-up. And sometimes that follow-up was just an awkward silence. Did you feel those long, pregnant pauses?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And then you felt the need to fill in for those pauses.
Yeah, I tried hard to like think of something to say without even, it was almost like it came out of me. It wasn't really like I pre-consciously thought about it, right?
Right. So basically what we did there is we had an exchange where I asked you 2 questions, and then whatever your response was, I validated your response. So I basically made you, whatever you had just said, I was telling you was the right thing or a good thing or an interesting thing. Right. And then what that turns into is a chance for us to have more conversations about things that matter to you. And that's how by the end we found out that you walk 5 minutes to your local gym.
And that's like personal information that I don't share with anyone. So there you go.
Right. And, it's funny. We didn't know where we were going to get to. It's not like I was trying to find out what your route is, but at least now I know a little bit more about you. I know that you eat protein shakes or protein bars for lunch, which tells me that you're busy. It also tells me that you probably don't plan for lunch. It also tells me that you probably live in a fairly Spartan house, because if you're going to only eat protein bars and protein shakes for lunch, it probably also means you're not spending a lot of time and effort decorating your walls or making sure that you have fancy plants in the house.
No, yeah, that's 100% right. Yep.
So there's a lot of information that comes out when you're just willing to have a conversation where strategically your objective is just ask questions and then validate the other person's response. Ask questions and validate the other person's response. So even though it could feel awkward, right? It for sure felt awkward. Everybody who watches or listens to this conversation is going to feel that awkwardness. But at the end of the day, the awkwardness is something that you'll get over, but the information is something that's invaluable.
Because people are so uncomfortable with that awkwardness that it almost comes out of them, some personal information, because they almost feel like they need something to say, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. Right. And what happened is those pregnant pauses that I introduced, it's a form of what we call elicitation. Elicitation is a technique where you get other people to share personal information without asking for it directly. So I could ask you directly, how do you get to the gym? I could ask you directly, or I could just pause while we're talking about the gym and I ask you something like, is your gym at home or is it nearby? Right? I'm not pressing you for specifics. But then when that silence sets in,
try filling the gap.
It gets really awkward, right?
Yes.
It gets really awkward. So that's just one of many elicitation techniques that we use. But just to give you a sense of how that works, if you're going to try to control a conversation, getting back to your original question, what are some techniques that you can use? If you're going to try to control a conversation, the first thing you have to understand is that it's going to feel awkward at first. But then once you start to get into a rhythm of it, and once other people start to understand that when they talk to you, you're the one in control of the conversation, until that happens, it always feels a little bit awkward at first.
So now this is interesting. What if everything I told you is BS and I lied to you? Is there a way for you to tell that I lied to you?
It's a valid question. This is where the movies get it wrong too, right? This is my first time ever talking to you. So I don't know any of your baselines. I don't know any of your normal standard behaviors. I don't even know if the person you are off camera is the same person you are on camera, right? Because who you appear as whenever you start your podcast episodes, this could all be a persona that you've been preparing for the last 2 hours or 2 days. And that once the camera turns off, you're actually someone totally different, super introverted, super extroverted, who knows what, right? So it's very, very difficult to be able to tell if someone is lying to you in the moment if they are a stranger. It's much easier to tell if somebody is lying to you if you've known them for an extended period of time and you have some kind of personal relationship with them. It's called understanding their baselines and being able to see the variance that they have against their baseline.
So in a way, so let's say we first met and you're right off the bat, you're not going to go in just going for the personal information right away. You're going to work up towards it over time by maybe asking those smaller questions like you asked me.
Correct. Yeah, it's a technique that we call windows and doors. Windows and doors. In any conversation, people will talk. And as they talk, what they are doing is they are opening windows and opening doors where you can steer the conversation. So, for example, If you and I were to have met on the side of the street or met at a grocery store or met at the gym, right? It would probably start just like it started today, right? Hey, good morning. How are you? Well, that's just a window. We're opening a window to just see, will you talk back? And some people say, I'm fine. But other people are like, yeah, it's been a good day. Or other people might be like, I'm having a great day. How are you? So there's all these different responses. So when you open a window to see whether or not someone's going to further engage on that topic. So if you imagine, think about are you married, engaged, girlfriend, anything like that, Bryan?
Nope.
No. So whether you like girls or boys, I won't press you on that. But when you're flirting with somebody, what you're doing is you're offering these little windows to see if they're going to let you continue to take that conversation in a certain direction, right? Hey, I like your earrings. Where did you get them? Or, hey, I like your pants. Where did you get them? Or, hey, your shirt looks nice. Or, hey, you look good in plaid, or you look good in blue, whatever it might be. You're opening these little windows to see if somebody will let you go through and then have a bigger conversation. Oh, yeah, I'm a summer and my skin has always matched summer colors and you look like a winter. Are you a winter? Do you look good in blue and gray and black? Like, that's how you know that somebody has let you into the conversation topic. But you have to constantly be trying to find these windows and doors in conversation so that you can advance the conversation forward. Oftentimes, when you feel like a conversation has come to an awkward halt or a strange end, and you're sitting there and you don't know what else to say, that's because you didn't offer a window or a door, and neither did they. So now you're both kind of standing there in the hallway, wondering what to do next.
I've heard you say that anxiety is a superpower in the CIA. Why'd you say that?
Well, there's a couple things, right? So I'm gonna make an assumption because I haven't known you for very long, but I get the impression that you're an introvert. Are you introverted, Bryan?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, yeah, for the most part.
And then do you also deal with some anxiety on your own?
Of course, yeah.
And then is the majority of that anxiety social anxiety, or is it like something else?
That's a good question. I never thought about that. I would say it's other things rather than social anxiety.
So
just
things like
work, yeah, like career, just all that stuff.
Worrying about the future kind of thing.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so one of the reasons that I call, or that the CIA sees anxiety as a superpower, is because anxiety focuses you. There are so many people who don't know what they're going to be when they grow up. There are so many people who don't know where next week's paycheck is going to come from. They don't know how they're going to fix their relationship. Like, there are people who have no idea how to do anything. And right now, they're just playing video games or surfing Netflix or, doing whatever they do for their day job, flipping burgers or turning wrenches or programming computers, right? They're distracted even though they know they have shit they need to figure out. Anxious people don't have that happen to them. Anxious people have such anxiety because they can't take their mind off the thing that causes them anxiety. So if that's work, there's a reason anxious people become super successful at work. It's because they've been worried about work since they were like 14, right? There's a reason that anxious people so rarely get raped, beaten, mugged, abused. Because if they're anxious, they're worried about those things. They're thinking about those things all the time, so they don't let themselves get into dangerous situations where they will become victims, right? This is the unfortunate, truth about the lie that the society believes about extroverts and people who are the life of the party and people who are like fearless. All of those people, tragedy befalls them all the time. They're the people you read about who got hit by a car on New Year's Eve, or they're the people that you read about who have these tragic accidents, or the people who are like murdered on the side of the street, or the people who are part of accidental shootings and whatever else. People who have anxiety are so hyper-focused on self-preservation that they persevere and have higher probabilities of success than the people who don't have anxiety. All CIA has learned how to do is be able to use psychological profiling to find those people, and then they train those people so that they can direct and harness their anxiety instead of constantly be overrun by their anxiety. So anxiety is a superpower that's so valuable that CIA actively recruits to find people who have it. And then they train them how to use it. It's just like any other superhero story you've ever heard, right? The hero has the talent, but they need to be trained to use their superpower.
So how do we train that superpower of anxiety? Because a lot of people, like you said, it is a superpower, but for a lot of people, it can get in the way, right? And it can cause them to not perform. It can cause them to maybe not even like take an action, right? It can hold them back. So what are some techniques that they trained you to be able to perform under pressure and control your anxiety?
I mean, there's a lot of them, and there's so many techniques and tools that I've basically built my company around the idea of teaching people these skills, right? But in a nutshell, just to give you a couple examples, first, we have to understand that the human brain is wired for survival, right? The human brain is wired to survive. We came from cave people, cavemen, cavewomen, and our evolution physically and biologically has not kept pace with our evolution industrially and technologically. So we're basically cave people who live in a modern day. And we didn't evolve. Our emotions, our cognition, our psychology has not evolved at the same rate as all of our innovation has evolved. So as a result, we live in these beautiful homes connected to the internet 24 hours a day, with videos and movies that we can stream in on a TV, where we don't even have to, every phone call you make can now be face to face. There was a time when that was just science fiction, but now it's reality. So we as human beings, we are wired to always look for threats, no matter how good things get. So even though we have all these wonderful things, what are we still focused on? We're still focused on the things that we don't have, or we're focused on the things that we could lose, things that could be taken away. I could lose my job. I could lose my house. I could lose my car. My wife could leave me. My kids could get hurt at school, right? We start looking for threats in an ocean of blessings because we are wired for survival. When what we really should be doing is thinking about not how to survive, but how to thrive, how to take all the good things we have and make more good things out of those good things. It's the difference between an investment account and a savings account. When you put your money in savings, you're protecting it because you're essentially afraid of losing it. When you put your money into an investment account, you're putting it into a position where it will grow faster. It will work for you. You are willing to lose it in the effort and the opportunity that it might yield more. Human beings, the way that we are biologically wired, we think of our time as a savings account when we should be thinking about our time as an investment account.
Is there an aspect of human nature that people tend to be most ignorant about that we just don't even realize is a thing that's just like in us?
So there's a lot of those. There's a number of places. And again, when we talk about people, we have to also layer on top of that culture, national identity, social values. I mean, it's not just a simple question about all humankind, because human beings break into different types of groups, right? Like boys and girls think about it differently. English speakers and non-English speakers think about it differently. Fathers and non-fathers think about it differently. So, but one of those areas that you're talking about, one place where human nature is always present and rarely leveraged is an understanding that you can make other people feel good about themselves. And when you make someone else feel good about themselves, they feel good about you. Because most of the time, going back to our conversation about human beings wanting to thrive versus survive, because we are so survival mindset oriented, we're always looking for the person who makes us feel unsafe. We're always wary of the person who makes us feel threatened. So we're always apprehensive to meet strangers in case that stranger might be someone who's dangerous, someone who lies to us or steals from us, or that person who might steal my girlfriend or ruin my life or who knows what, right? We are always looking for the threat because we are survival oriented. when you can understand that all people around you are survival oriented, everybody, doesn't matter the color of the skin, doesn't matter what language they speak, doesn't matter how much education they've had. Every human being that you meet right now is survival oriented, whether they're uber wealthy in Los Angeles or whether they're broke ass poor and homeless in Alabama. They're all survival oriented. So when you come in and you do nothing to threaten their survival, and you take specific intentional action to make them feel comfortable and make them feel validated and make them feel seen, what happens is they start to trust you. It's just as subconscious, just as unconscious as what you were saying about when there's a pregnant pause and you feel the need to speak. The same thing happens if somebody makes you feel good about you, you will naturally start to trust them. It's a term, you've heard the term falling in love. We have a term that we call falling into trust. Falling into trust happens when you like somebody and you don't really know why you like them, but you like them and you've liked them for long enough, and then all of a sudden you trust them and you don't really know why.
So that's your approach. It's not head on trying to get them to trust you. They have to fall into it in a way.
Correct. It's just, I mean, it's the parallel track to falling in love, right? We compare so much of espionage to dating because the game is almost the same. If you want to learn about how to build influence, all you need to do is learn about how to build relationships, because all influence is relationships with certain people who give you certain access to their power or their network. So we really do run this parallel model of how do you find a partner, fall in love, and get them to marry you. That's the same process for how you find a target, get them to share secrets, and then get them to commit to a long-term espionage relationship.
So right now we have a hot war in Europe with Russia and Ukraine, and then we have another one in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas. What other parts of the world should we be paying attention to that have the most risk of becoming a hot war as well? Maybe places of the world we're not even paying attention to that has the risk of being another hot conflict?
Yeah, so this is funny to me, Bryan, right? It's funny to me because what you're saying is what the average person understands. There are only two hot wars. Do you know how many armed conflicts there are right now in the world? According to the Human Rights Institute, there are 144 hot war zones in the world.
Wow.
But you're an American, I'm guessing, right? Or you're Canadian, Bryan?
American. Yep.
Yeah. American media dominates the English-speaking world. So because of that, all anybody really talks about is whatever makes the headlines in mainstream American news. So with 144 active hostile zones, the oldest of all the war zones is actually in Colombia. So in Colombia, there have been active, hot, armed conflicts with rebel groups, with the FARC, with various drug cartels. I mean, it's been going on for decades, multiple decades. So when you think about what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel, it's the most recent, it's the most high profile, it's probably got the most hardware in terms of, various military forces that are being employed. You've got naval forces in Ukraine, and you've got air, surface to air, and air to surface missiles happening in Israel. So you have all of that going on, but the world is always in conflict. Syria is still in conflict. Yemen is still in conflict. Places in Latin America, all across Africa are still in conflict. There are child soldiers still fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So there's all sorts of conflict going on all the time. But to your point, where is the next conflict? Where is the conflict going? I mean, right now, all roads clearly show that there is an increasing tension between the United States and China for what's called near peer competition or close peer competition to become the next global leader, the next global superpower. The United States has held that role for a long time. China has been slowly, well, some would say not so slowly, catching up to that title. And there's no way that you can look at the next 5 to 10 years and not be curious about what will conflict look like between the United States and China? In many ways, you're already seeing it. Not only do you see China running exercises over Taiwan, disregarding Taiwan's airspace, demonstrating blockades of Taiwanese water, not only do you see that at the same time that the United States is selling more weapons to Taiwan. The foreign aid package that was just passed by the House in the United States, if you've been keeping up with what's been going on there, that foreign aid package included money for Israel, included money for Ukraine, and included almost $9 billion in aid for the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific is a catch-all term that basically means they have an opportunity to send Taiwan a bunch of money. Because they're investing, the United States is starting to invest in the future conflict that they're hoping to avoid, but also have to realistically accept is going to come when China chooses to take aggressive military action on Taiwan. To go even deeper and nerd out a little bit more, China has been actively increasing their influence operations in Taiwan since October of last year. The elections that just happened in Taiwan in January were a clear demonstration of how much mainland China has already influenced Taiwan. Taiwan is basically a democracy. It has a president. It has a Congress, kind of like the United States. The president is anti-China. The Congress is pro-Chinese unification. So you can already see that just like the United States is divided between the president and the Congress, the same thing has happened now in Taiwan. And a big part of that is because China is so actively involved in influencing Taiwan, but that's not the kind of thing that makes American headlines. So instead, Americans are still worried about how many rockets came in from Hamas and how many shells does Ukraine need to keep bombing Russia.
If World War III were to happen, what would it look like? Would it look like World War II?
So it's funny, people ask me this question relatively frequently, and it's always surprising to me that people assume World War III hasn't already started. I would actually make the argument World War III has already started. We're in the middle of World War III right now. It's just that World War III looks nothing like World War II. World War II was about the Axis powers and the Allied powers fighting against each other in these giant unified military conglomerates, right? So it was the UK and the Australians and the Americans and the French all fighting against to push, Russia out of, to push the Nazis out of Poland. It was a threat of nuclear weapons. It was drills. It was bombing raids. That was World War II. Well, think about what World War I looked like compared to World War II. World War I looked completely different. It was trenches and gas warfare and hot air balloons instead of bombing raids. Well, World War I and World War II were less than 50 years apart. So why do we think that World War III and World War II would look anything like each other? It's already been more than 50 years since that war ended, right? So when you look into what's actually happening around the world in terms of military doctrine, strategic development, technological evolution since World War II, all the evidence points to the fact that World War III would be a war of what's called proxy conflict or proxy wars. Proxy conflict, proxy wars, means that wealthy benefactors essentially subsidize or pay smaller developing or third world countries to fight against each other. And then in that infighting, they can drive influence, they can infiltrate with some of their own espionage agents or spies. They can create havoc all over the world and always have plausible deniability because they're not the ones with boots on the ground. So when you think about what proxy war is, and then you think about what happened towards the end of the global war on terror. So think about it. The United States invades Iraq. The United States invades Afghanistan. That was basically the end of your traditional World War II style of invasion. When you start looking at what happened in Syria, what happened in Libya, what happened in Yemen, and you start looking at how conflict has progressed since the end of the global war on terror, you start to see that what you have is these proxy conflicts. Iran funds Hezbollah in Lebanon to fight Israel. The United States funds Ukraine to fight Russia. China funds you name it, in Southeast Asia, to fight any powers that be, from the Australians to the Americans to whatever else. So you have all these proxy conflicts happening now, essentially between democracy powers and authoritarian powers. So that's what World War III really is, in my opinion. It's a war between autocracy and democracy, and it's being played out in a battlefield of proxy conflict. All of the hot wars that you know of right now are proxy conflicts. Russia might be invading Ukraine, but Russia's being funded by China, North Korea, its own pocketbooks, the oligarchs, right? And then it's got lots of friends who are all warlords throughout Africa and Southeast Asia. And then who's fighting? Who's supporting Israel? Who's supporting Ukraine? It's all the democracies of the world. And that's why Israel's having such a hard time right now, because how can you claim to be a democracy when you're killing tens of thousands of non-combatants in what is essentially like a human rights atrocity? It's a very difficult war to play.
Something that came to my mind when you were talking is, so World War II, right? It was 39 to 45, and it was like 6 years. So do you think that this whole World War III, the proxies, the proxy war, do you think this could stretch out for maybe like a 10 to 15 year period of all these proxy wars happening?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's actually really astute of you, Bryan, because if you look at how war evolves, you start to see how different the lengths of war take. Because the length of a war in many ways dictates the commitment of the fighters. So World War II was much longer than World War I, and the global war on terrorism was almost 20 years long, and that's assuming that you think the global war on terror is over, right? So you can see how the lifespan of these conflicts is being drawn out more and more. So if you consider proxy wars to have started essentially in Syria, then you're looking back to 2012, 2013, when those really started, if that's when you're thinking about the start date. So it's not unreasonable to compare it to the global war on terror, which lasted 20 years. That would mean that from 2012 to essentially 2032 is 20 years of proxy conflict, of what might be called World War III. Well, if you look at what economists are estimating that the United States will no longer be the only superpower by 2032 and 2033. So that's right on schedule for essentially what could be the end of a World War III, or an extended proxy war. So that the purpose of a proxy war, again, the purpose of what's known as an intrastate war. Intrastate is when one sovereign nation invades another sovereign nation. The purpose of an intrastate war is to radically destroy both economy and industry in your opponent. The strategy behind a proxy war is to preserve the economy and preserve the industry of your opponent, so that when you conquer them, you can immediately make their industry and their economy work for you. That's the purpose of a proxy conflict. The fantastic example was in Libya, right? In Libya, you didn't see these two opposing forces destroying each other. What you saw was that they were taking great care not to damage the local economy or the local industry, because they knew that one day one of the two would win. And whoever won, the faster they could get an ROI from the land that they just conquered, the better off they would be. In many ways, this goes all the way back to what it was like in the Dark Ages, when France and Portugal and Spain were fighting with the British, and everybody was trying to take new land. What they wanted was to win a very short, decisive battle that only killed knights and soldiers, so they could immediately get the benefit of all the farmers and the merchants when they took over the territory. What we learned coming out of World War II is that nuclear weapons destroy countries and destroy industry. So the United States had to rebuild Japan. They had to help rebuild Germany. It took, 5 to 10 years before those countries were back into a position where they could be productive. Nobody wants to do that in the current era, and that's another reason proxy war is so viable.
This is interesting. Do you think the United States will ever have a draft again?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I've been hearing more and more people talk about. Unfortunately, I think it is very realistic that the United States will have a draft again. How imminent is that draft? I hope that it's not anywhere or anytime soon. Because the draft in the 1970s and 60s was such a disaster, there's no way that a politician will want to implement that again. So what that means is the United States is conflict averse right now. The United States has really become quite conflict averse since the Obama era. They have not wanted to go in guns blazing like you saw during the Bush administration. Since then, the United States has tried to find a way to engage in operations without risking its reputation or really risking its troops. As frustrating as the global war on terror was, and I mean, I served in the global war on terror just like, tens of thousands of other soldiers. Every soldier who served in the line of battle in Afghanistan or Iraq, we all acknowledge that the lives that were lost were terrible and unnecessary losses. And we are all very grateful that we really only lost a few thousand soldiers. Compared to Vietnam, compared to World War II, compared to, most every other major conflict that America's participated in, our total net losses coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan were very small. Not that any life is worth losing, especially not for some ridiculous political effort, right? But the fact is the United States has learned now that Americans don't like to lose American lives to fight somewhere else for someone else on some ideology that doesn't make life better for us here at home. So if the American government was to implement a draft, especially anytime now or in the near future, it would be utter chaos in the United States. Now, that said, we also have to keep in mind that the United States military has failed to meet its recruitment quotas for the last, I think, almost 2 full years. So as Americans are coming of age, they are not joining the armed forces. They are finding other opportunities, or they are choosing to take no opportunity that has to do with the U.S. military. And I think a big part of that is because people have woken up. The veterans who are now parents have woken up to the reality that if their children join the military service, then their children are just going to be pawns to politicians that nobody agrees with anyways. And your 17 and 18-year-olds who are turning 19 and 20 are realizing that they are more valuable to society as some kind of productive member of society rather than enlisting in the military just to get a college education or to get some kind of technical skill that they could get on their own.
I'm gonna shift a little bit here. What do you say to someone that's chasing a dream and just nothing's going their way, nothing's working out?
Anybody who tells you that chasing a dream is going to be easy, anyone who says that is lying. There's no way chasing your ambition is an easy thing to do. The reason so few people succeed is because so many people give up. I mean, just think about it for a second, right? When we watch a professional athlete, or when you watch a professional musician, or when you watch a pop musician, we all assume that those people are the best in the world. In fact, they're just the people who never gave up. There could still be someone better at singing. There could still be some better running back. There could still be somebody better at the pole vault. There could be a better skier. There could be a better guitar player. There could be dozens of people better than the professionals. The difference is that the professionals never quit. No matter how hard it got, no matter how tired, no matter how many people told them it would never happen, they kept going anyways. So the same thing is true for anybody out there who's aspiring to be the best teacher or the best entrepreneur or the best computer programmer, the person who's trying to solve the mystery of how to cure cancer. There's no reason to expect that a dream is easy. If anything, you should assume that a dream is basically the hardest thing you can work for.
What's your hope for the future? Because there's a lot of pessimism going on right now, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. What's your hope for the future?
So my biggest hope for the future is that people will start to recognize that our country, the United States, was born of independence, born of a group of people who thought independently, not a group of people who felt the need to fit into some category that was defined by somebody else. whether that's politics or whether that's gender roles or whether that's college educated versus not college educated, whether that's skin color, whether that's, religious beliefs. That's not where our country was founded. Our country was founded from a huge diversity of people who all wanted to be independent. And in pursuit of common independence, we did something incredible, and we defeated the British, and we founded our independence when we were previously a colony. My hope is that we will get back to that. We will get back to embracing our independence, because our best hope of evolving for the future is going to be born in the superpower we naturally have, being independent. And even though we are independent, we can find common ground. But as long as we keep falling for these ridiculous ideas that we have to either be conservative or liberal, we have to either be male or female, we have to either be a college graduate or not a college graduate, it's not right. You're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. When we create this dichotomy, we lose any hope of independence. And independence it's always been the thing the United States has that no other country in the world can even try to replicate. What Americans need to experience is just 4 or 5 days in any country around the world, and you will see nobody has the sense of independence that America has. And at the trajectory and the path that we're on right now, we are trying to be more like them than we are trying to embrace what's always made us powerful.
Mm. Yeah, a big thing that they pushed in school for me about America was our power is in our ability to compromise. And I feel like we're losing that right now. It's very black and white. There's no in the middle anymore. It's very hard right, hard left. We're losing that. I think that's how we solve a lot of problems, is getting back to that compromise, right?
Yeah, what's tough to me is that, compromise is the word that is often being used in universities and schools. Compromise is not what we want. What we want is collaboration. Compromise means you don't get what you want and I don't get what I want, and we both just accept that we're not getting what we want, right? Collaboration means I bring my strengths, you bring your strengths, and we create something stronger together. To your point about how there's black and white and two extremes, I completely agree with you that we live in a world now where people honestly believe there are only two options, and both of those options are extremes. What we're not recognizing, Bryan, is that in the middle, there is a silent majority. The vast majority of Americans, the vast majority of people sit somewhere in the center, but they sit there quietly. So you don't ever hear their voices. You don't ever hear their rational, well thought out, reasoned opinions. All you hear is the drivel and the bullshit that comes from the extreme left and the extreme right. And everybody in the middle is essentially smart enough to be like, to not even try to compete with the idiots on both sides. So we in the middle just kind of end up being just constantly disappointed and watching this chaotic show unfold between red idiots and blue idiots, right? Rich idiots and poor idiots, whatever else it might be. It's a fool's errand. And the vast majority of people recognize it, but we sit there quietly instead of embracing our own independence, our own voice, and taking independent action.
My last question is, if you had a minute with your younger self, what would you tell him?
If I had a minute with my younger self, I would 100% tell them to stop chasing ass, to just recognize plenty of sex is coming. Just focus on doing something right now that better prepares you for success in the future. Read an extra book, take an extra nap, listen to your teacher just one extra day a week in class. Do something that invests in your brain instead of always trying to chase tail or chase popularity or chase being cool or chase some other form of public acceptance or public approval. And that's just me personally, because when I was younger, man, all I cared about was being accepted by my peers, whether that meant looking cool or having the coolest girlfriend or something in between.